Hello and welcome to today's podcast/interview/Decktech video on Naya Maverick. I have live in studio or in the telephone line Dirk, who has won the Highlander Masters Westfalen tournament number 18. Welcome, Dirk.
Hello, guys.
So, let me briefly describe your deck, and if I'm talking bullshit, then you correct me. So you have played a very proactive green-white mid-range deck with a tiny red splash. So tempo-wise, you should be close to an aggro deck. And besides the best cards in these colors, which are obviously busted as fuck, you play a land package with Urza Saga, Devs, and Thespian Stage. Is that correct so far?
Yeah, that's right. I'm playing a rather aggressive deck. Always depends, obviously, on the matchup. Against some matchups, you also can be really controlling because you have a lot of 3 and 4 drops that cause huge value for you, and so you can outvalue your opponent and don't have to race most of the time.
Okay, cool. So yeah, obviously it has worked well. Congratulations again on your tournament victory.
Thank you.
I myself have played, or rather tinkered with a green-white Maverick list myself, so I consider myself a competent interviewer here. And by the way, for those of you who are listening and or watching, the deck lists will of course be linked in the video description. So Dirk, please reveal to me why you play red for a handful of cards.
Yeah, also started out tinkering with the green-white, basically Hatebear list, but then it didn't feel that powerful, so I tested out the splash for black. So I could basically, the base is Grizz because he was really free to play, because you, on the one hand, the third color is pretty free, and on the other hand, you had a lot of elves that could also produce black, and it expanded quite a bit for Tainted Pact, Demonic Tutor, and Mind Twist, but it still didn't feel that strong. So when Søren recommended a red splash to me, I tested it, and it was instantly really surprising how strong the red cards are. Like, you have red and 6, who's really strong, and especially the newer cards like Domri, not Domri, but Lelia, Minsk, and Ragavan can all be game-breaking on their own and really solidify the red splash for me.
Okay, cool. So I have also tested the Saga package in my list, and I wasn't really happy. So I see you only have 2 targets with Shadow Spear and Mox, and your overall count of artifacts is also not that high, so Saga is not expected to throw any really big robots. So how is the Saga performing for you in the deck?
Yeah, for me it's like the cards you can tutor with the Saga are Chromox and Shadow Spear, and those cards are already good cards, and they are already playable without the Saga, especially Chromox, because you rarely want to get it with the Saga, but you can if you need to. And so the Saga is not really restricting you very much and not having a big downside in that sense. But on the other hand, it has a huge upside if you get to mid and late game, where you can find them with all the land tutors like Wayfarer, Elvish Reclaimer, Crop Rotation. Like, you have, makes those cards gets them to make value in the late game, so they are not dead anymore.
So the main plan for Saga for you would be to tutor it in the mid to late game, where you don't have much else going on, and try to combo by these imprinting Saga on Thespian Stage trick.
Yes, but like, you also have a lot of random artifacts that can boost the construct, so they are not that tiny anyway. Like you have.
But you don't have that many. I have 5 or so.
But you have Smuggler's Copter, Portable Hole, Jitter, and like the
Lion Sash.
Yeah.
But still, it's a handful or so.
Yeah, but those are just, they randomly boost your token, so they are most times not that weak. Like they are at least 3/3 and maybe with upside. So
yeah, so maybe I was a bit trapped because, as you know, I also tinkered around with the Angry Robots deck, where the Saga is one of the absolute key cards, which also produces a lot of value early on, and you can drop it turn 2 and spend turn 3 and 4 building robots, and that's good on its own because half of the deck is artifacts. But maybe I need to learn that Saga plays differently as a late game card only in the Maverick build.
Also, a thing that makes Saga strong is that you can, in matchups against blue decks, you can just pass the turn and he has to do something proactive, because if he just holds his counters, you just produce a token and he can't use them, and you can easily play around counters that way.
Yeah, it's a nice attack against control decks. A nice option, definitely. Okay, then let's move on a bit through your deck list. I had some cards that struck me as, or rather as, I have to ask Dirk why he's playing this. So apparently you seem to be on the Misstep and Probe belong in every deck party. So I personally don't like these cards very much, as long as they don't support Spells, Matters, or Delve topics. So how do the 0 mana blue Phyrexian spells perform?
Yeah, I think you have to differentiate, because like I think Probe belongs in 95% of the decks, because it's just such free upside, and against blue decks, to know what you have to play around is such a big factor that it's always worth it, I think. And Misstep is like a different story, because Misstep I would only play if it fits the game plan, and if you, like in this deck or in most aggro decks, it gives such a huge tempo advantage that it's really good in those strategies, I think. And like it's rarely a dead card, because you can always find 1 mana spells late game also. And yeah, in this deck it's especially strong because all the value you create with your 3 and 4 drops, you can makes the 1-for-1 trade with Mental Misstep really more worth it for you.
Okay, so when you say that the Probe is basically free, so my position is, with all the strong cards that have been printed recently, deck slots are actually a resource that I want to spend well, and just because a card is a 0 mana cantrip, it doesn't mean that's a free spell, because I don't want to put it as the 101st card into my deck. And why not just play another of the like 50-ish good proactive card choices that you could include, because against control you wouldn't have the information that Probe gives you, but you would just spam another proactive threat and would have higher threat density and just overload the blue decks, which is, I think, a valid strategy anyways.
But you would, because it basically cantrips, you would always put it in for your 100th card, so your worst card basically, and it's basically makes you play 99 cards, which are better than the card you would play if you wouldn't play Probe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know where you're getting it, and maybe I am totally mistaken, because and usually this concept is absolutely crystal clear to me. Just the point is that 10 years ago I would have simply agreed to this point, but these days I have a hard time finding cuts in my decks, and it's not that trivial to determine what the worst card is, and second step to determine whether the worst card is actually worse than Gitaxian Probe. But yeah, I assume that's also a matter of taste and strategy and stuff.
but not playing Gitaxian Probe makes you have more of your really good cards, you know. So the average quality goes up also.
Well, any case, so I will. I think it's for my personal taste. I will continue my list without red and without Gitaxian Probe. Also because I don't want to replicate your deck. Because what's the point? What's the knowledge gained from that? Okay, well, let's stop on the probe topic. And one card that crossed my mind: if Misstep is so nicely fitting into the deck plan, why not also play Mana Tithe, for example?
Mana Tithe also has a big upside, but it can be a really dead card in the late game, because you obviously, when your opponent has like 6 lands, he won't tap out most times. And so it can be a dead card late game. And another point is that you, like in this deck, I was on the tournament on Sunday, I was really mana efficient. I had like barely 1 mana left open all game.
Of course, this was of course a trick question. I knew where your answer would be heading, but yeah, definitely. I think there are cases of card is dead for both Mana Tithe and Mental Misstep in various stages of the game, but the fact that that Misstep is a 0 mana card that doesn't block your curve or make you keep mana open and play worse stuff, that's of course a thing. Speaking of cards that annoy the hell out of opponents, have you thought about Winter Orb? I played in my green-white build and I'm having a lot of fun with it, and a lot of fun also that my opponents don't have.
Yeah, as I said in the beginning, I started with the green-white Hatebears list, so in that shell, Winter Orb seemed to be the natural choice, but it turned out so terrible because I was always starving myself for mana instead of my opponent, so I was always dampening my development instead of
okay, I see. So my experience was quite different. Sometimes I crippled myself a little bit, but I always crippled the opponent more, so to speak. But I think in my list, I used to run more mana sources than you did in your list. So I have reconfigured my list a little bit now. It's still green-white basically, but I have also reduced the mana curve and the lands a little bit. So I'm curious how this testing will work out. Maybe now Winter Orb is also not good anymore because I've smoothed out and reduced the amount of lands. So, but I'll continue testing and we'll compare results with you in a few days/weeks. Okay, going through your deck list further, I was curious to find no Traverse the Ulvenwald in your deck list. I think that this card is an auto-include in green decks because it itself, as long as you can secure to have a green mana on turn 1, it replaces a land and can become a real strong tutor in the late game.
I think this card is can also be compared to Abundant Harvest and belongs, in my mind, in a category with most of the tutor cards, because like you can play all these tutor cards, which are from a pure card quality standpoint, they are good cards, but if you play too much of them, you don't play enough creatures.
Yeah, but you don't play that many. I mean, you don't have any of these cards, right? You don't have Abundant Harvest as well.
But as I said, it belongs in a category with tutors. So if you play these mana inefficient cards, they don't bring you ahead on board.
Yeah, I see your point, but so your threshold is basically very low because which cards are you playing? Once Upon a Time and Servant Library, and that's it. From this category.
Eladamri's Call,
okay, fair point, yeah.
Recruiter of the Guard is another one. Also, the Fiend Artisan and Fauna Shaman can be seen as one.
Okay, if you consider these cards in the same category, so for me they are just creatures with utility upside, and Eladamri's Call is an instant, so it's rather a different role because I mean, yeah. I mean, in general, I see the point, but Traverse is very cool. If you have a rare opening hand without elves, then it can still develop your mana plan for the future turns, and it can be very good in the late game. So I think the cost, the mana inefficiency aspect is very tiny with this card, I think.
But, like, I don't want to start the game with turn 1 Traverse, because like that's such a slow start to...
Sure. I mean, I don't want that either, but the card just provides the option to do that in a hand that would otherwise be a mulligan. So you can basically keep a hand with Forest Traverse if you want to play. I mean, you can run into Mental Misstep, of course. That's then devastating, but again, that can hold true for many hands. Yeah, okay, well, I think I understand your standpoint.
That card too much, because like in general I don't like that type of card. Like,
okay. Yeah, I mean, my history as a Sultai player maybe puts me in a different perspective here. Maybe I'm overrating this card for this archetype.
Another thing is that a lot of Graveyard Hate gets played, so it's not like automatically a Tutor late game, because...
No, it's not automatic, but it still, it happens more often than not. But yeah, there are these moments in mid-game where you think, oh wow, this would be a great tutor now, but I'm on Delirium count 3, and it doesn't work. And yeah, these situations also can happen. So it's not only sunshine with this card, I agree.
And I'm not filling my graveyard myself, because like I have...
Don't worry about that. Your opponents fill your graveyard with your stuff, or they die, so... Okay, so let's move on through your list. So I see Ranger class in your list. I tried that as well, of course, but I wasn't very satisfied because it's a bear, and then you can invest another 4 mana, which makes it in theory sort of a future sight, which has a like 50% hit chance in this deck, sort of, with like about 50 creatures. But if you activate this and you don't have the creatures on top to play, then it's just very, very clunky. So I cut this card a while ago because I deemed it was a roadblock. So how did it perform for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting card, because I discussed a lot about that already on Sunday, and I see it as basically as an adventure card where you get 2/2 Wolf, and then you have, like, you basically draw a card where you can already have it on board, and it's uncounterable and can level it up. So it's really like a late game insurance against blue decks when you have...
So with adventure card, you mean it's the green Bone Crusher Giants of sorts?
Yeah, it's not the level of Bone Crusher, but like the...
But the idea is you play the wolf as an adventure, and then you can invest another 4 mana to get the future sight card.
Also, you first have to spend the 2 mana, and getting the counters can be good on, like...
Yeah, so I mean, I see the theory here, so that was the reason why I played it myself in the first place. But did you get it? What are your recent testing results and tournament experiences? Did it confirm your ideas?
On Sunday, it really got to the point where you can, where I had to level it up. But in testing it, I already came to the point where I was out of cards because my opponent was trading 1-for-1 all the time, and then I could level it up and get the advantage and win through it.
Interesting. Okay.
That's a really high upside for a bear, basically.
Okay, I will keep that card in mind to maybe re-include it, depending on my testing results. So another card I was wondering is Scavenging Ooze. So how much Graveyard Hate does the deck need these days? You already have Endurance, which is a very, very strong card. I would probably never cut at the moment, simply for it being 3/4 flesh for 3 with a strong upside. And you have Lion Sash, which is also very flexible, tutorable with Stoneforge Mystic. So is Scavenging Ooze really still necessary?
I think Scavenging Ooze is just a really solid card. Like, you have a 2 mana creature, and just like Ranger class, you have something to put your mana in late game. Like, and it also has, like, the Lifegain can be important against some decks, and Yeah, it's not like the the 3 slot in the stack is really contested, and the 2 slot is like solid cards like Scavenging Ooze that just do their job. And
something that just crosses my mind. Speaking of Lifegain, I saw that you didn't run cards like Thrag Tusk, which are powerhouses against red or aggressive damage dealing decks. How is the general life gaining capability of your deck, and how do you perform against very aggressive decks?
Basically, against very aggressive decks, I have to look to be on the board first, and not when I don't get damage through on the board, it's really hard for the opponent to burn 20 life. On the life gain part, it's I already have Shadow Spear with multiple tutors, so that is a big life gain source. Thrag Tusk is, I think it's just too costly. I don't want to spend 5 mana on it, but another life gain card that could be included if the meta turns out that way would be Kitchen Things.
Oh, really? That I haven't seen that in a while.
Because it also gets better with the unbanning of, or temporary unbanning of Birthing Pot.
Oh yeah, Birthing Pot. Do you play that in this list?
Yeah, well, I couldn't on Sunday because it wasn't unbanned already. I will definitely play it. It's just too good.
I'm very, very skeptical about Birthing Pot because it's just so time consuming. I had a random encounter with it in my Magic Online session yesterday, and it was, oh gosh, he goes into the Birthing Pot think tank, and he wasn't even a slow player, but it's just, you can activate it over and over again, and it's always tutoring, and in real life it's even more time consuming because online you have the list of your deck and you pick the card and that's it, but in real life you browse through the deck all the time, and I don't know, I don't think this card is broken anymore, but it's the same as Divining Top or Survival. I'm not a fan of it.
I also don't think it has a positive impact on the format, but it's just my personal opinion.
Any case, let's not have that be the topic for today. So continuing in your list, one of the 2-drops and the card that in general surprised me most in your list was the Wildborn Preserver. So most of the cards that you play or not play, I have sort of thought about with my deck, but I never really considered Wildborn Preserver. So how does this card perform in this deck, which is not really a flash deck or something?
Yeah, I got inspired to play it from the mono green list, in which it looked really, really strong. And yeah, it's maybe the weakest 2-drop, but it's also very solid card, and you can the reach is really important, got a lot more important with initiative, and so you can defend your initiative, and also flash is really, really helpful against blue decks to like make him either counter it on his turn, or you have also a really big mana sink where you can put all your mana in and get a threat late game.
So to pay some credit to Palace Jailer, you can also defend the Monarch the same way you can defend the initiative.
Yes.
So blocking and preventing combat damage being dealt to you. Okay, interesting. And when we talk about 2-mana flash dogs, I have tested Ogmar's Archivist, what's his name, and Deep Gnome Terramancer, so both 2 cards from the Baldur's Gate expansion or the commander decks associated with it. Have you considered these?
Those weren't around when I started as just green-white Hatebears, but those they are comparably to like a Mind Sensor. They don't prohibit your opponent from doing it. If your opponent can still choose if he wants to search his library, so that makes it a lot weaker in my mind, because like if your opponent has something so strong that he just lets you draw a card. I played against that card on Sunday, and it's I just let my opponent drew 3 cards, and because it didn't matter for me, and I just did more with my...
I mean, They are not the same slot as Mindcensor because you said the 3 slot is contested and they are 2 drops.
Yeah. But like the difference on as Hatebears from prohibiting your opponent and getting an own advantage is really big.
So interestingly, these cards, I found them in random Baldur's Gate set or collector boosters and thought, wow, these are cool cards. And actually these cards were the inspiration for me to start the green-white Hatebears deck. But over time it became less and less Hateberry, and they went out, and Galactique went out, and Thalia went out. And so it's not really a Hatebears deck anymore. I think Hatebears should really be mono-white with all the overloading of hate, and green-white is just better as a Maverick mid-range value approach as yours.
That's the same progress my initial approach took.
So
like also Galactique was a big inspiration for that, and it just turned out all he did was shut down my own Elspeth.
Yeah.
That's all he did.
Yeah, actually, my current list, I don't run Elspeth and I don't run Wandering Emperor anymore. So no, I could actually re-include Gadok because I think apart from the Green Suns, there is nothing that he blocks. But still, I don't want to be in a situation where I think, oh, Green Suns, that would win for me. And then Gadok says no.
Yeah, I also have Minscain Boo, so that's another one that I don't want to be blocked.
Yeah, right, you have another Planeswalker for 4, right? Okay, so rather scandalous suggestion from my side to sort of relieve the 3 mana slot would cut the Spellbinder. That card is crap.
Yeah, for me that always felt really, really good because it's so flexible. Like you get, on the one hand, you get a really good beta, which is, and flying is really, really got a lot more important with initiative.
Because you can block.
Yeah, because you can get the initiative back if your opponent starts to.
And that, yeah, okay. But it is 3 mana, 3/1 flyer good enough at that? I mean, that is grilled easily. I mean, even if you see the hand, take the Fatal Push or whatever, then it's still playable for 3 mana. It slows it down a bit, but it's not. So always when I play this card, I look at my opponent's hand. Of course, it's nice to have the information, but I rarely hit a card that is really terminally denied then. So for me, I didn't ever create that much of an advantage with that card. Maybe I was just unlucky, I don't know.
The most times I'm not taking the removal. The most times I'm taking the 4-drop or something. Like if you take the 4-drop, it takes so long for him to get to 6 mana to get that card back, and you just basically take a card from the opponent.
Usually in serious matches against non-ramp Highlanders, the 4-drops are quite rare. So how big is the chance to hit to have a 4-drop in your opponent's hand when you play these? I mean, how many 4-drops do you play? Like 5 or so? The chance is not very big to hit a 4-drop actually.
Also, delaying 3-drops can be like really important. That scenarios like what occurs most often, and like
3-drops are abundant. Yeah, 3-drops are the new 4-drops.
For example,
try like, red, it's the new blue.
Just delaying an important card for your opponent is turned out to be always
interesting. So for me, this was a card which was kind of isolated. I played it, it did not much, it died, and it went into oblivion. Well,
if your opponent pays the 2 and just bolts the Spellbinder, you basically you played a 1 mana 3/1 flyer, because like you pay 2 and he pays 2, like when it levels out. So that's really efficient. And in testing, he also was very good against chain combo, because he could delay chain combo sometimes, where you can like win before your opponent starts the combo. And on the other hand, it was good against blue decks, because you like the information to know what you play against, as said with the Gitaxian Probe, is really crucial against blue decks sometimes.
I got the feeling that blue decks aren't much of a hassle for this deck, because you do so much value and proactive and cheap stuff that blue has a hard time keeping up anyway, so I'm not that convinced that this information advantage is really necessary in these matchups.
Yeah, but I play a lot of cards to especially be good against blue decks, and because.
Do you think this will be a plan with future? Because I have the feeling that the meta is currently shifting away from blue, actually.
In my mind, the best things you can do are like this green-white stuff, a space, and like some flash colors, and blue-red X decks like Timur or Grixis are like.
Yeah, Timur. That's an exception. Yeah. I think Timur is the best blue deck that is around. So I think Sultai is also viable, but it's not a really blue deck. So many chain decks don't run counterspells, for example, for a good reason. And of course, robots decks are sometimes blue, but also not the classical blue.
So I'm either playing the mirror, which like is okay, I think. Like you won't impact the mirror too much with 1 or 2 cards. Or you're playing blue, or you're playing some like what I played against were like decks that played black instead of white, and white turned out as such a more strong color than black in those decks because of the new cards you get are so powerful, like the adventure stuff. You got Solitude, which is really strong.
With adventure stuff, you mean the initiative stuff?
Yeah, I mean initiative. Sorry. Skyclave is fairly new, which is also really, really great, and like so those matchups you're also winning.
Okay, so much about our meta speculation here. So, because we've mentioned this several times now, a word on initiative. It is as broken as we all think, right? So at the moment I'm considering actually in any color of Highlander to include initiative cards. Also the 4 mana rares in black and green and red, which are also fair and broken given how broken initiative is. So which assuming that you agree, which path is it you take most in the Undercity?
As I mentioned on a lot of cards before, arguments to play that card are initiative, so it really shows how strong this mechanic is. And contrary to like Monarch, when you mostly get Monarch with cards like Palace Jailer or Fall from Favor, which if you lose the Monarch, it can be like catastrophic because your opponent gets the creature back, and with initiative you just like you. I
mean, with Monarch only when Palace Jailer does it.
Yeah, Fall from Favor also.
Okay, right. Yeah, sure.
And there are not that many other Monarch cards.
No, true story. Okay. Under the assumption that we're talking about Jailer and Fall from Favor, then yeah, they also get the creature back. True.
And the thing with initiative is if your opponent gets it with like 1 turn, he just gets the basic, and you're really also still ahead in the Undercity. You can get it back immediately.
And also I think this the effects are really on steroids. So 2 plus counters on creatures, and then 5 damage to the opponent, then draw a card, and then Planeswalker Ultimate. This is just insane. So most of these steps are almost as good as the Monarch card draw, if not even better, and then getting all of these
they instantly impact the board, which is important right now. So like you don't get the card in hand and have to play it, but you get the effect right on the board. And you basically always go left. Like the only reason to not go left is because is when you don't have a creature to put the plus counters on.
I had the painful experience, so I tried the red 4 mana rare in my burn deck on Sunday, and I once had the painful situation that I had to decide, okay, I place no counters because I don't have a creature, or I dare go not left and I will lose the 5 damage. So that was really a tough decision. In the end, I actually took the non-damage part because I wasn't really proactive and I needed some value from the deck, and that actually turned out quite well, but it didn't feel good to depart from the left path.
Yeah, it like when you don't have a creature, you're not pressuring that much anyway, so the 4/1 mana skeleton can. Yeah,
actually, the pitiful thing was, I had a creature, but that had vanishing, and would die, and I had a haste creature in my hand, so the upkeep where the counters would be placed was the exact point where putting counters was not good. It was a bit but still, I mean,
it's still a special case. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Basically you always go left.
Yeah. And also, I have to admit, I could have foreseen this situation and planned ahead in a better way, and I could have administered having a creature in upkeep, actually. Okay, so we agree initiative is broken as fuck. Great. Then there are two more cards that I want to question you about. So how good is Ramunap Excavator? If you say that the 3 mana slot is overloaded, is that card really a thing?
Yeah, he's one of the weaker 3-drops, given that, but he's still really synergizing extremely well with the land tutors. Like, you have Wayfarer, Reclaimer, and Crop Rotation, where you can get you can get a Wasteland lock, which can solo win your game, and like you get all these utility lands. Like, you can get multiple sagas, and you can get lands combo. You can basically, if you need it, you can just draw cards with the Horizon lands. Apart from the just getting fetch lands back, it's really, really synergizing well with all the deck.
Okay. And the other card is another 3-drop. It's the Renegade Rallier. I was very happy to see it in the list because it's one of my pet cards. But actually, it's a pet card from Limited and from Cube, and I never really got it to work in Highlander deck. So did it perform?
Yeah, at first when it got recommended to me, I was really skeptic, but like right now I couldn't. It's an auto clue for me because like you use it as a wood elf, which is really good, and
the wood elf because it can get a fetch land.
Yeah. Oh. When you get your fetch land back, and on the other hand, you can when you attack with like small creatures like X-Drinker or Tarmogoyf or something like that. You just trade with the opponent and just bring it back with Rallier. That is really also a good mode. Like, it basically always has some good thing it does.
Okay, that's cool. That's nice to hear that the card like this is an auto include for you. That makes me very happy.
Also with the third color compared to green-white, you have a lot of more fetch lands, which also give a little bit more edge to the Rallier.
It's not that much more fetch lands. You have 7 fetch lands and Prismatic Vista and potentially Fabled Passage if you want it in green-white. There's maybe 1 or 2 more when you have a third color.
No, I have 9.
Yeah, so
9 plus Vista, because the only one you not play is the 2 colors you don't play.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's 2 more. I'm skeptical whether that makes that much a difference regarding Renegade Rallier's performance. But it's something worthwhile mentioning. Okay, so I have no questions many of your card choices. Now it's only fair, I think, when I put some of my card choices in the ring. And one of them, it's directly connected to the Renegade Rallier. It's Extraction Specialist from Streets of New Capenna. I would think that there are many cases where this is actually better than the Rallier. So it doesn't bring back permanents, but only creatures. But still, it's a 3/2 lifelink on itself. And the drawback that the creature can only attack and block once the specialist is gone. It's not that much of a drawback. Even if you have like mana elves that you can still tap for mana, or fauna shaman or fiend artisan that you can still use the abilities even if the other guy is still there, or what's that, Luminarch Aspirant, something like that. So I really like this Extraction Specialist. Have you thought about that card?
Not really before this podcast, but basically the idea for the deck is to skip the 2 slot. So you basically usually play turn 1 elf if you have, and then play 3-drop. Like, you can play if they shoot your if they shoot your elf, but basically what this basic idea causes is two problems with the extraction specialist. Like, also you can compare it with Lurrus, which is, I think, the better of the two. But on the one hand, they get the problem that the one slot is like full with mana elves and stuff, which are not the best thing to get back. And on the other hand, the 2 slot is rather empty because like you want to skip it usually, and that makes that gives you less great targets for cards like Lurrus and Extraction Specialist. That's the reasoning why I didn't include it.
Okay, I mean, but the problem with a 1-drop into 3-drop is the same for Renegade Rallier, except for the case where you have a fetch land that you can use turn 2. Because if you have to use fetch land turn 1, or you don't have fetch land turn 2 for any other reason, then Renegade Rallier is worse than Extraction Specialist because it's a 3-2 without lifelink.
The thing with Rallier is, like, for me in my testing, I get lands with Rallier in about 50% of the cases, so not having that in 50% of the cases is really crucial.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not trying to say that you should cut the Rallier and add a specialist instead, but it was just I think the Rallier is the extraction specialist is really did perform very well, and I mean, you're right in saying that there are not that many targets because the 2-mana slot is not full, but I think especially with the Tutor creatures, Fiend Artisan and Fauna Shaman, this performed really exceptionally well for me. I don't know if you played Charming Prince. I think you do not, right? Also with Charming Prince, this is very interesting, very charming, because you can, if your graveyard is full, I also did things like I play the Specialist, get Charming Prince, flicker the Specialist, get back Fauna Shaman and stuff like that. That was really impressive. But this doesn't hold true if you don't play Charming Prince.
With Lurrus, I was already really considering it. Like in the previous version, I played it and was considering if it's, for me, it's better than Ranger Captain of Eos. But for me, like for that reason that you don't have a lot of great targets for it.
But Lurrus and Extraction Specialist, there's a difference. Extraction Specialist can get 2 drops. Lurrus cannot.
It can. It also can get permanents. Like with Lurrus, you can get permanents with CMC 2 or less.
Oh, really?
So you can also get like Smuggler's Copter or Jitterbake.
I haven't played Lurrus in a while, apparently. Didn't say 1?
I'm pretty sure it's 2.
It is 2, you're right. Okay, this is I thought I was prepared very well, but apparently there's some gaps in my knowledge anyways. Okay, let's consider Lurrus as well. Okay, in this case the Lurrus and the Extraction Specialist are comparable. Still, there is a difference that the Extraction Specialist gets the 2-drop back for free without having to pay the mana, which is...
but I think the upside to play it a lot longer and for the opponent to have to get rid of Lurrus is...
I don't think so, actually. I mean, of course, in the ideal world where Lurrus gets to live, then it creates a huge amount of advantage. But in the real world where creatures are shot on sight, Extraction Specialist has made its value and Lurrus is just dead. I mean, if you had 5 mana to instantly play the 2-drop, then not, but that's also not the real world where we have 5 mana in Highlander. So
even if we start with the 1-drop, your opponent has to get rid of it because it's just getting more and more creatures from your graveyard or permanent space. But it's also...
at the moment, I'm not. I considered Lurrus for my current list, but I didn't include it. But it did include Extraction Specialist because I was very happy with it, with the tempo and flexibility. Maybe you can give it a try if you want. But I can also test it for you and talk to you in a week when I'm still convinced or not. Okay. And another card that I was absolutely thrilled to have is Restoration of Eiganjo, which is the white 3-mana rare saga from Neon Dynasty. The only reason I can see to not play this card if you don't run basic planes, or if you run only one. But this card is so amazing, getting a land and then either ramping or reanimating, and then becoming a 3/4 dog that throws more dogs, and this card has been absolutely exciting for me whenever I resolved it.
Yeah, well, on this card I tried to practice it, or test it, but I didn't really get to it right now, but I will definitely test it. I think it's also, I really agree that it's really good, and we'll try to test if it really proves itself, or...
I mean, it's just another of the good value 3-drops like Kiki Jiki Saga or Clothis, or what's his name. But okay, so yeah, Clothis, I can really recommend testing it, so I was very, very happy with it. So how about your removal package? I quite like March of Otherworldly Light as another good instant speed exile removal. Wouldn't that be a nice addition for your removal package?
Yeah, maybe it will find the way into the deck in the future, but right now it's like I rate the other white removal that I play higher than it, so I will have to cut a proactive card, and which like I wouldn't really want right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see it. It's a thing if you want to increase your removal count.
Yes, and another thing is that Murktides and Forages and stuff like that are like the most threatening thing for the deck, and it basically doesn't get rid of Murktides.
No, only, I mean, it does get rid of that easier than Prismatic Ending if you have some spare white cards in hand, but still it's not where you want to be.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of removal, what about Brutal Cathar? So I was very, very happy with having that card and very unhappy playing against that card always.
I'm not really rating him that highly. Like, I see him just as a bit stronger Banisher Priest, because like in most games I play, the day and night flip doesn't really happen, so it's just like a Banisher Priest most times. Like if it happens, it's good, but if not...
But if the downside is Banisher Priest and the upside is something hugely better than that, then it's still a solid baseline. And it is, you can, I mean, just like Banisher Priest, in the worst case you can slam it, remove the opponent's blocker and swing. That's not too bad an option to have in the creature base.
But if it gets, if it eats a removal on the attack, you can basically get blown out also. Like it's still has downsides, so maybe I'm underrating it, but I don't really see it that strong right now.
Okay. I mean, also I wouldn't say the other cards I suggested, especially Specialist and Restoration, I would definitely deem more important. But just, I also run Brutal Cathar and I've never really considered cutting. I was really intrigued by not finding Tireless Tracker in your list, because I always thought that it was the best green creature or one of the best green creatures, so where is it?
Basically in that slot I'm playing Welcoming Vampire, which is, I think it's really underrated. Like, of course in some decks you can play it because your count for it is too low, but in this deck it's really, really good because you have basically around 37 cards that trigger it, which is more than lands that would trigger Tireless Tracker. It has flying, which, like said multiple times before, is important for initiative.
Yeah, sure. So I'm also very convinced by Welcoming Vampire, and I played it as well. But is that a reason to cut the Tireless Tracker? I mean, of course you have limited slots, but
yeah, like
so Tireless Tracker is really too clunky these days.
Yeah, the really important thing about Vampire is that you get the card directly, and when you compare the two cards, like Welcoming Vampire and Tireless Tracker, you basically pay 2 mana for 1/1 and stats on Tireless Tracker. Really not that.
Yeah, okay, sure. But the thing is that you can... It's... If you don't have a 1-drop... So, I mean, you get the clues that you can use somewhere in the late game when there is open mana, but you already mentioned that you were very mana efficient in the last tournament and didn't really have mana open, so that's the difference then. But I would think that... So Tireless Tracker plus Fetchland is 2 clues immediately, while I see a higher danger of the Welcoming Vampire to be killed before it produces value.
That can happen, obviously, but like with Tireless Tracker, like I want to play my 3-drops on 3 most times if it...
Yeah, sure, and if you do a Tireless Tracker on 3, it can also be killed before it creates value. Yeah. That's true. Okay, interesting. But so this was one of the most striking insights for me, that maybe in a green aggressive proactive deck, Tireless Tracker might not be good anymore. So I wouldn't have thought about this before. Okay, so let's talk a bit about your mana base. So you have 34 lands that produce mana. You have Chromox and several elves. Were you happy with that amount? And is that your general gold standard for these decks, or have you this time tried something new?
Overall, I'm just really happy with the overall balance in the deck, with like removal creatures and mana and spells and stuff. And with the mana, I can use it, put it to use like every turn basically. Like throughout the tournament, I had maybe like 1 mana each game that went to waste, but so I can always use it. It's not too many lands for me, so I rather play a bit higher land count to just put your lands into play every turn and not miss land drops, which is can be quite devastating. So in this deck, it really helps to not screw, and if you basically don't get flooded because you have so many mana sinks. That a really good balance. And another thing is, it's not only those 34 lands, Mox and Elves, it's also the later part, the like Domries, Knight of the Reliquary, Land Tutor for Gaia's Cradle, that can also produce a lot more mana.
Yeah, but not in the first turn. So I mean, it's also important to have the right amount of lands on the opening hand, like at least 2 lands, or 2 or 3 lands and 1 elf, ideally. So there are more elves that one could play, like Elves of Deep Shadow, Boreal Druid, Arbor Elf, if you wanted to exaggerate a bit. But you were happy with this amount of 1 mana Manadorks.
Basically, the ones I'm not playing are like Arbor Elf, which I don't have enough forests for.
That's surprising. How many forests do you have? I mean, you will have at least 3 duels and 2 basics. Isn't that enough? I mean, you're fetching for them.
But I basically like just the risk of not having it is like too big.
Okay. So you want a mana elf that really definitely produces mana when it lives. Okay, I can see that. And also, we don't really have to discuss Elves of Deep Shadow and Boreal Druid if you say you don't want off-color random mana dogs. These ones are enough. What about Gilded Goose?
As I said, I have enough use to put the mana always to put it anywhere, so I don't want to just have the mana for 1 turn, but to have a constant mana source. The thing I tried before, which was also because of the lack of forest, is Utopia Sprawl.
I was also surprised to see Wild Growth with it, which is not a creature, instead of Arbor Elf, for example.
Yeah, basically I like the enchantments more than the elves because they make it harder for your opponent to interact with.
I mean, okay, they are more stable, but I mean, the motto of the deck is creatures. Fiend Artisan, Fauna Shaman, they all want creatures. They cannot recycle Wild Growth later on.
It's way better for the opponent to not be able to stop your development or disrupt it than just basically to have creatures. But as said with Utopia Sprawl, I'm not playing it because of the lack of the forest.
I see. When we're talking about Arbor, I see Green Sun Stenith obviously in your deck, but no Dryad Arbor. Did you have this situation that you would think, oh man, it would be so great to have Arbor in my deck?
Yeah, obviously you're always, when you have Green Suns on your starting end and no mana if you're always missing the Dryad Arbor, but the amount of times that you draw it where you don't want to draw it is like way too big.
Yeah, I'm also a bit split on that card. So sometimes it's great, and also being able to fetch it as a surprise blocker for Ragavan or something can be great.
Yes.
But drawing it turn 4 when you need mana and not a vulnerable 1/1 forest, that's of course okay. Interesting. Okay, so I see only 4 basic lands in your deck. I have a rich history of being afraid of moons, so I have to ask you, did you ever lose because of Blood Moon, and what's your plan against moon decks?
Yeah, when testing the deck, like, I definitely had games where I just straight up lost to like Blood Moon and like also to back basics, which is also not that bad against me. But in general, I don't have little answers to it. Like I run my own elves, which
they do help.
Let me play the game.
Chromox does help.
Yeah, Chromox is another thing.
And you have certain removal that you can still fire when you have some mana left.
Yeah.
But the problem with Blood Moon is sometimes that you lose your main color mana, so you cannot really play your enchantment removal anymore. But with of course, if you have the elves down, then this doesn't happen.
Also, Blood Moon is and Back to Basics are the reason for me to play Outland Liberator over Ghazali Pride Mage, just because you can remove Moon on 1 mana. It's like so good.
Wait, doesn't Ghazali Pride Mage do this as well? It also 2 mana casting cost and 1 mana sacrifice cost, no?
Yeah, but you have Ghazali Pride Mage requires you to have green and white.
You mean you only need 1 color of mana?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't get it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, and also, I mean, Outland Liberator is a really, really cool card. I mean, if this day and night thingy does happen, which you don't believe in, then it can be even better. Okay, so regarding Manabase and colors, I have often heard the statement, the 3rd color is basically free. So you were among the persons saying that. So how do you see my counterposition that there is, in the meantime, so much good utility lands, especially from Forgotten Realms and Neon Dynasty, with which you can fill a 2-color deck, so that I really don't have space in the mana base for 3rd color. So I don't really think it's that free, at least if I want to play enough basic lands.
Yeah, as mentioned before, I also started with your position, but in testing it really showed how much power the 3rd color gave. And also another thing is that you basically, like in this archetype on this deck, I don't really have the mana left over to put in my lands, because I always have business to put it into like cards that are better mana sinks than like some random utility land.
Okay.
And so they give me a lot more power than some utility lands.
Okay, we're coming to the end of this podcast. One final question to conclude this. If we are living in Mana Wonderland anyway, couldn't we then get a blue land for Oko in, or a black land for Grist? Especially Grist, as you said in the beginning, is really, really great in decks with the Green Sun Zenith. So if the Splash is free and the Zenith is already in the deck, why not play Grist or Splash for Oko if mana is free?
Yeah, the 4th color is a more complicated topic, because like you wouldn't only play like Oko, you would always play or you wouldn't only play Grist, and you would play a little bit bigger of a Splash. So you would have.
Well, my current list only plays Grist as a black card. I do that.
But then, in my opinion, it's better to run a little bit more black to get some really powerful black cards like Demonic Tutor or Tainted Pact. Like,
Actually,
that's what the third colors free thing is like all about. You can get away with.
okay, let this be a topic for future podcasts. But I think I don't want to play Demonic Tutor in that deck. I think it's not as proactive and helping for that deck's strategy. But I mean, I'm a bit more defensive on the Demonic Tutor topic in any case. I don't consider it as broken as many people do. But that's not really.
But the thing to get back on the fourth color is like you have to. If you only play one blue card, do you want to preemptively fetch for your fourth color, or you other? So if you do it, it's
and then you do it, so you have it because you want to prepare, and then it gets wasted, and then you draw the card, and it doesn't fit anymore. I can see.
Preemptively fetching for it feels bad, and if you don't do it, you maybe don't have your fourth color when you draw the Oko, so that is like that makes the fourth color a lot more inconsistent in my opinion, and but it's definitely. Oko is definitely that powerful to make that deck choice to build a little bit more unstable and play the fourth color for a higher power level.
Okay, then final thing. So we have the tradition in the Highlander Masters Westfalen WhatsApp group that the winner of the tournament may choose the avatar for the group, and you choose Hexdrinker, a card that we haven't talked about today. So why did you choose Hexdrinker, not anything else?
Because Hexdrinker was so great as a mana sink. I could find it with Ranger Captain and Ranger of the Earth. So I had it really often, and it solved board stalls against non-blue decks, and against blue decks they really couldn't handle him, so he would just go rampant and level up to 8 because I always had so much mana, and it was just such a great card.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, thank you a lot for your time for this interview, and we have reached the end of our broadcast. So looking forward to more testing on the Maverick archetype in the future. So, and to the audience, thank you for listening, for watching, and see you soon on any social media that we share. Take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye.